You are Locked On Cougs, your daily podcast on the Houston Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Park Rangers, Locked On Coogs here, and I want to admit, shouts to Coug fans, I think is run by Go Cougs at this point. They're kind of all lumped together. I'm not a gigantic message boards guy. I did get sent this in a texting thread from some folks about this, and I think it's Shenanigans, but apparently the Big 12 Insiders podcast, 24/7 Sports guys, said that Willie Fritz is being linked to Arkansas. This is only a few days after there was rumor that Willie Fritz is being linked to LSU. This feels like these SEC schools that can't get anything right and pay a bunch of coaches to not coach once they get fired. Really like the idea of hiring a Willie Fritz type guy. But I want to tell you what, Arkansas is not going to happen. LSU is not going to happen, right? I would point out that the 24/7 guys would admit themselves on the show, as you listen to the clip, that Arkansas would be a huge mistake for Willie Fritz. Sam Pittman, the man they fired earlier this year, was making just about $5 million annually. Willie Fritz has a $4.5 million, both base salaries. Admittedly, the accelerators, I think, are steeper at Arkansas, but that's not a whole lot different. Frankly, I would point out even those accelerators or bonuses might be steeper at Arkansas. You might be more likely to hit them at Houston, given the opponents, the resources, etc. Right now, Arkansas does have access to a lot of resources: the Walton family, the Jerry Jones family, etc. But those donations haven't ever come to fruition in a major way in college football. Frankly, I think Jerry Jones gave like a $10 million donation like sometime in the last decade. That's kind of the last major deal you saw handed over. And that's odd considering how much money they could potentially be tapping into. Further, Houston's got the better locale, better recruiting background, better recruiting your backyard, all that kind of stuff. And for what it's worth, is a program on the up and up. We've seen Houston have folks flock to it in the transfer portal last offseason. We've seen when Houston is the cool thing to do, they can land recruits. Like when you had, Houston H-Town takeover, getting guys like Ed Oliver. When you have Willie Fritz and Fritz Smith, bringing in KEYSHAWN Henderson, these things build on themselves, right? And so while I think Houston's got the better job than Arkansas for a number of reasons, including, frankly, that his family, Willie Fritz's family, lives in Houston, and he brought his family to Houston for the Power Forward job, but also to be closer to his children that live there, right? I would also point out that Arkansas, with, I guess they do make an SEC TV dollar check or whatever, but they owe Sam Pittman over $7.5 million to not coach. Willie Fritz's buyout at the University of Houston at this point would be $19 million. And then let's say they pay him more than they paid that Pittman guy. You're looking very quickly at over close to $35 million to get this to happen. And I don't see Arkansas doing that for a guy that's 65. I love Willie, and I think Willie has proven me every concern I've had about his age wrong at every turn of the corner, right? And I want to give mad props to him for that. However, if you're Arkansas and you're the AD at Arkansas, are you going to sell your donors on a $35 million proposition to bring in a guy at 65? I could tell you how great Coach Willie Fritz is. I don't think the Arkansas average donor is going to think that's worth it. They're going to say, hey, let's take that $35 million and go get someone who will be here longer. The Arkansas rebuild is going to take more time, right? Now, I also think that it's worth pointing out that he did get linked briefly to the LSU job. And look, the inverse of this, I think, is that of the jobs on the market, and frankly, of the jobs in college football, I will admit, I think LSU probably is one of the top jobs in the sport. Great support in terms of finances, great recruiting background. You get parts of Texas, you get parts of the Deep South. You also get the state of Louisiana, which is not a very big state, but per capita is incredibly talented at recruiting. And it feels like outside of Brian Kelly, every coach that goes there wins a title, right? I think that's a great job in this sport, and I don't want to act like it's not. I'm not going to sit here and try and sell you on something else. It's a great job. The reason I don't think that's going to work is, frankly, twofold. One, in terms of what they want in a coach, LSU has shown time and time again they're much more of the CEO, business owner, make sure that the trains are running on time kind of guy as far as the head coach goes. That's not Willie. Willie's a ball coach, right? Willie is a true ball coach. He is in the culture building process. He is involved with the guys. He's amongst them, so to speak, right? That's not quite LSU needs a guy that's shaking hands and don't. And while Willie's good at that, he's not the that's not the thing he does as like his calling card, like an LSU would be looking for, right? So I don't think that that's where they would go with that. I also look at LSU and frankly think they're in too messy a spot to negotiate this right now. The current athletic director is the same athletic director that's negotiated getting Jimbo Fisher his deal at Texas A&M. And so if you put that together, the gigantic Jimbo Fisher buyout and the gigantic Brian Kelly buyout were both negotiated by this kind of half-wit LSU athletic director, right? You've heard the governor of Louisiana say that the current AD will not be picking the next head coach at LSU. Well, if the AD's job is not to hire coaches, you start to question how long the AD is going to be there. And I don't think some new AD is going to want to say, hey, I'm bringing in the guy from Houston and Tulane. Trust me on this one. I get that, right? The same reasons. Right? I think they're going to be looking for a splash, a big name. The Lane Kiffins, can you bring back Nick Saban? They're going to be looking for those kinds of names. And reality of whether or not they can get them is one thing. That's what they're looking for, right? I don't think that's going to be where Willie Fritz lands either. I don't think Willie Fritz is going anywhere. I think it's just being flattered to be tied to these is fun and all of that. But ultimately, Willie Fritz is going to coach at Houston, and I'd imagine he coaches at Houston throughout this rebuilding process, wins some titles and wins some rings along the way, and then hangs it up and gets to watch his, program he built up continue to be strong. I think that's where you're going to see this really go. I don't think any of these SEC jobs are anything going on. For what it's worth, I don't think Willie Fritz is a Penn State guy or a Florida guy either. If you're asking me who goes where, I kind of think Matt Rule ends up at Penn State. I kind of think Joe Brady ends up at LSU. As far as Arkansas goes, I kind of think Rhett Lashley might make some sense as well. And each of those guys you'll note is a very different guy than Willie Fritz. And I think that's kind of why I'm shaping my head around like those guys seem to make more sense for what those programs want. Willie Fritz makes a lot of sense for what Houston wants, and what frankly Willie Fritz wants seems to make a lot of sense for what Houston is, right? And that's a program he can build up in a part of the country he wants to live in a part of the country that's flush with all the resources he wants and cares about. He cares about recruiting grounds. He cares about, he said over and over again, not having to get on a plane to recruit because your backyard is that kind of talented. That's what Willie Fritz wants, right? And that's what Willie Fritz wants to do as well. He wants to be in and amongst the players. He doesn't want to be the CEO and all of that. I just feel like all of this talk is flattering to have your coach wanted by so many, but just kind of random podcasters like this Big 12 Insider Group, whatever. And admittedly, look, this is a clicks economy. I don't mean to act holier than thou. I should probably not say it like that, right? But I think that's all this is. I wouldn't worry about it. I don't know if anyone else should be worried about it. It's conjecture, and that's kind of where I would leave it at. Now, if something, I guess, goes chaotic and more rumors heat up, whatever, I'll let you know. I did DM some people on the Arkansas front that I only know a little bit. Some people, frankly, I talked to when that whole basketball game was coming together, like, hey, what are you hearing on this? And none of them had really put much together on Willie Fritz either, which I think is also fairly telling. But if I hear more, you'll hear more. But I just don't think there's a whole lot going on there. Speaking of a whole lot going on there, I do think there's a whole lot going on in this injury and availability report. And so I want to talk about that a little bit in just 1 second. Before we get too far, today's show is also brought to you by our buddies over at Mazda. Move and be moved, because Mazda crafts cars for those who do more than simply move, because Mazda delivers confidence every ride, more IIH's top safety pick awards than anyone else after this past year. And I feel like it's worth pointing out. I talk about being a dad of a toddler all the time. I still feel like a new dad every day in a lot of ways. Putting a car seat in a car where it ranks really highly in these top safety pick awards just feels a little bit more makes you feel a little bit more confident, makes you feel more calm about the whole process, which can be really stressful. And just like Houston's players, Mazda sweats every single detail, because when you make every move count, impossible can become irrelevant. Mazda, move and be moved.